DP here with Veterans Network Champions Club, doing a follow-up video to the changes proposed by the VA specifically for sleep apnea. This is one of the questions we've been seeing a lot based off the previous videos. So we're going to kind of do a quick overview today, not too much in depth, but depending on the reception here, questions that we get, we may be able to bring in some specialists to have a conversation specifically towards sleep apnea and what these changes can impact. And then we'll have some other topics that we'll touch on, specifically mental health, which is another question that's come up a lot. But specifically to this, we'll go to the email. Bottom line up front, there are changes that are coming, and I think the better prepared we are for those changes, the better. But if you are currently rated, this is not going to affect you. It's not going to change where you're at. This is more so now if you're going to seek a service connection for sleep apnea, specifically going forward after this takes effect, or you're going for an increase. So a few things to highlight here on the email is to that same point, right? This is not changing the current status of your rating condition. This is looking at after the date of effectiveness of this new rules being proposed, that in turn now you have to adhere to it, right? So regardless of whether or not we agree or disagree, we have to understand the landscape to put a battle plan together to be effective with our argument, specifically for sleep apnea. And one of the biggest things for sleep apnea is there are significant changes. They're going to modernize how they're rating sleep apnea and go from a place of, hey, you require this medical device, to how effective and responsive is that? And the key word here is responsiveness. So I want to go to the current rating criteria that we know and look at basically what we understand, right? You have the 30, the 50, and 100% rating, 30 being hypersomnolence without requirement of a CPAP, 50 looking at requirement of a CPAP, and 100 looking at having lung failure and conditions that lead to this section here, right? As you can see. But the biggest thing I want to focus on is required to use of a breathing assistance or device such as CPAP, right? So that's pretty much it, right? You have a medical condition, you require now the use of this medical device. The changes now start looking at, hey, we have to look at the effectiveness of this. Because again, this is no different than saying you are prescribed medication for anxiety. Well, that doesn't necessarily equate to what your rating should be, because we start looking at the symptoms and how effective what you're dealing with. So for sleep apnea, that was not the case before. That is the case now. So we have to better understand how to articulate and say what we're dealing with. So here are some of the proposed changes. Again, this information will be also linked, and it's also in the email. So the bottom, you'll see the click here and here sections where you'll find this information, but we'll also note it so you can review it as well. But considering here the modernization of sleep apnea syndromes now as it's being retitled, right? So sleep apnea syndromes, which covers obstructive, central, and mixed sleep apnea. Sleep apnea may be defined as complaints of unintentional sleep episodes and or awakening and or snoring associated with apnea, hypopnea indexes equal to or greater than, and the statistics are there. One of the biggest things to note here is how they're going to start rating this now, right? So proposing a 0% evaluation when sleep apnea syndrome is asymptomatic, with or without treatment. The VA will assign a 10% evaluation when treatment yields incomplete relief. That's the key word here. VA will assign ratings above 10, i.e. 50 or 100, so gone is the 30. Only when the treatment is either ineffective or the veteran is unable to use the prescribed treatment due to comorbid conditions, right? And the VA will assign 100% evaluation only if there's also end organ damage, right? So let's look at the actual breakdown of the actual proposed changes here. So when we look at, and again, this is cool because when you scroll down, you actually be able to see this and see what the regs will look like. So specifically here, we're looking at, again, 0 to 100, right? So treatment being ineffective with an organ failure. But for most folks right now, as we understand the 50, the biggest change here is treatment is being ineffective, right? As determined by a sleep study. Hence, you need a sleep study, use a device, be able to see if it's effective or not, and or unable to use the treatment due to our comorbid conditions and without an organ failure. And a key point here is the qualifying conditions that they give examples here, right? Conditions that, in the opinion of a medical provider, directly impede or prevent the habitual use of a recognized form of treatment as shown by a sleep study to be effective in the affected veteran's case, i.e. contact dermatitis, where the mask or interference touches the face or nares, Parkinson's disease, missing limbs, facial disfigurement, or skulls. These are examples. But a key point here is it effective or ineffective? If the treatment is ineffective, and again, CPAP is gone because there's various types of medications and modalities that are now provided for us and created. So medicine has moved forward. The old criteria is gone. It's not just a CPAP solves it all. There's various types of devices and equipments that are available. But if you're unable to adhere to this for various reasons, usually we would say things like, well, I can't use it because of X, Y, Z, but we don't articulate that to our mental health providers, or medical providers rather. So there's a few things that I really wanted to at least point out here, which is again, the aspect of effectiveness or incomplete treatment. So it's not so much, hey, you're going to lose your rating or you're not going to be able to argue it. No, it's saying let's understand what would be the rationale or reason why it would be ineffective, right? Beyond just, let's say, the markers and the numbers, but why can't you use it? Because if that's an argument or a reason that's valid, then we have to be able to start talking about that and bringing up why, let's say, we're not adhering to the medication, right? In this case. So some examples here, I pulled some resources that I think are good to look at. Is CPAP rhinitis due to inflammatory changes in the nasal mucosa as a result of persistent pressure. And they talk about different reasons why someone here may not be able to use this, right? Pathological processes such as sinusitis and nasal polypsis are often problematic and can be missed during routine respiratory review. And I'm reading here kind of, the next sections here. And they talk about various reasons why someone may not be able to use a CPAP. And this comes from continuous use of positive airway pressure, CPAP, fails, right? So we understand that for some folks, this just does not work, right? Now, considering here, this is a blog that came out with from Harvard Health, and they talk about I can't tolerate CPAP. And some of the things that are common to look at here is, why it's not easy and there are common complaints. So some common things that are noted here, breathing feels out of sync, right? Noise from the machine may cause issues, let's say with your spouse or what have you. Removing the mask during sleep, what's happening? Dryness of the mouth or what have you, right? So different issues that are there. Mask issues that include mask discomfort, skin irritation, marks or feelings of claustrophobia, discomfort with the appearance of wearing a mask. I bring this up because, again, if this applies, you have to speak up. Problems related to CPAP adherence is another study. Common problems related to PAP non-adherence, and looked at a group of veterans and non-veterans in this case here with PTSD. They looked at mask discomfort was the primary reason reported for non-adherence in both PTSD and control groups. Similarly, air hunger and high pressure were equally responsible for non-adherence in both groups. Claustrophobia, though, was more frequently reported in PTSD than non-PTSD, and it goes on to give some more statistics. This is from a study that was done for positive airway pressure adherence with veterans with PTSD. I found this report that was actually put out a year ago. So this is actually pretty interesting. This is May 1, 2021. And it looked at a veteran with CPAP intolerance. So here we have a 68-year-old veteran who had basically symptoms of loud snoring, frequent witnessed apneas, daytime fatigue, and sleepiness, underwent a home sleep test study and the results are provided there, and basically had issues tolerating CPAP and said he was scared of the mask, right? Noting that he had his difficulty was not related to CPAP pressure, but they also noted here that while in the military, he had a traumatic experiences while wearing a gas mask, and using the positive airway pressure CPAP mask now elicited feelings of claustrophobia, anxiety, and distressful memories while wearing gas mask then. So there's an issue there, right? So this is a valid point because, again, it was important enough or valid enough to be able to make the argument for this veteran specifically to what he was dealing with. So I bring this up because I think it's key to be able to at least talk about or showcase the different issues that may prevent you from utilizing this medical device, right? So considering this, the big takeaway point for this study here and again, we'll link this, but they went through a process of looking at different ways to mitigate the veterans' issues with wearing the device, exposure therapy, and things of that such. But the takeaway message is the intolerance, and it's noted here in the takeaway, the sleep medicine pearls. Intolerance to PAP therapy due to anxiety and claustrophobia are common, especially among veterans. Sleep conditions should consider referring patients with such symptoms to a clinical psychologist. Exposure therapy involves using the PAP in a systematic and step approach, which gradually results in a reduction in anxiety, and they did note that with this veteran. The reason being I wanted to cite this is because, again, there's different reasons why maybe this might not be the answer for you, right? Or you might be able to adhere to it. So we consider, again, the old rating criteria to the new rating criteria. We have to understand, again, here on the left side what we're used to, and then here on the right side what the changes are. We need to get to a place of understanding how to better articulate where we're at. So gone are going to be the days of saying this device is medically required, henceforth give me a rating, but now saying, okay, this treatment is ineffective for these reasons. And if there's a medical argument to be made, these are valid arguments that can be made, because again, these are things you may be dealing with, for example, but if you don't tell your doctor or your provider why you cannot use the device, then you don't have a medical reason to articulate, right? So this can make a difference between a rating of 10 or 50. So again, it is not so much that it makes it more difficult, it's more so saying let's understand the landscape of how to better articulate what we're dealing with so we can get a better reception from the VA when the time comes to file our claim. So hopefully this at least gives a few points. Again, we're not going into the weeds of this, but really the takeaway message here is there are going to be significant changes. And again, this is no different than any other medical condition that the VA looks at, right? What is the level of impairment of your migraine, right? Frequency and severity, right? You have to be able to articulate those things to get a proper rating. Same thing for mental health. So now for sleep apnea, the same thing is happening, right? So I encourage you all to get a sleep study, have those numbers, see if the treatment is effective. And if it is or is not, that's one argument. But if you cannot adhere to it for various reasons, speak to that, have that noted, speak to your provider so these things can be made known and on your record. So should you file a claim for either an increase or you appeal a denial from before or are claiming a new claim now, once this takes effect, you know exactly what you need to articulate. So the changes, yes, are significant, but really it requires now us more to be able to explain why this modality or that modality may not work to treat our sleep apnea condition that has risen to a level of an impairment. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, just a quick overview to touch base on that. I want to show some journals because I think it's just good to be able to say, okay, it is a known factor that these are reasons why maybe someone doesn't use these medication devices, right? And it's known for veterans that we also deal with other things as well. So if we don't speak about these things, it's like, well, I'm not going to talk about being claustrophobic because, right, they're going to look at me weird. They've literally done medical journal studies on this. It's a known fact, but if you don't speak about why you can't adhere to the medication, why you cannot use this device, that's something that's going to interfere and then potentially make the treatment for your sleep apnea ineffective, which then helps you make the argument for your sleep apnea disability claim. Hope this was helpful. If you have some questions, put them in the comment. Looking forward to continuing the conversation as we move forward through all these changes that are taking place and how they affect us and veterans to come.